Greetings, my name is Timothy Halloran. I am reporting to you from the Hard Times Trail, Asheville, North Carolina. Today is Monday, May 4th, 2020. Insert Star Wars joke here. Now, it goes without saying that we are in an incredibly potent time of so much tension and so much shifting. And of course, this is not simply to believe, but with astrology to test, to observe, to apply the scientific method, and to continuously see how the astrology indeed reflects back our life and our experiences here on Earth. So there is a tremendous amount of material to cover in terms of simply the astrology going on these first 2 weeks of May 2020. Yesterday, May 3rd, Venus squared Neptune. Venus is about to station retrograde at 21 degrees of the sign of Gemini before stationing direct 2.5 weeks from now at 5 degrees of Gemini at the end of June. So this is opening up this period of shifting, and May is such a month of restlessness. As we said, we're really experiencing that divine discontent, that stir craziness, that claustrophobia ever since our prior new moon conjoined Uranus. So there is an uncertainty. Things keep changing. Now, with Venus slowing down, stationing retrograde, there tends to be this uneasiness. There's a pausing, there's a void, and there's very much a questioning. Venus in Gemini is questioning our interests, our values, and who we're hanging around. During the pre-Venus station retrograde, again, this uneasiness, this loss of magnetism, things that used to have so much flavor, or people and groups that we used to be connected and sharing with, can have this tension, this uneasiness, and a loss of direction, a loss of certainty, or a loss of flavor. This is to begin this experimental phase of researching and rediscovering how we can share our own interests and values with those of like mind. So we're wanting to do relationship differently. Venus is also money, all of this changing of energy exchange. Gemini is information exchange. So we're talking about monetary, energetic, information, communication-based exchange, wanting to do it differently, wanting to do it in new ways, but unsure exactly how that is, or how it will be, or how we will do it. The Venus stationing square to Neptune is not solid. Things can be losing a vantage point of totally clear or realistic. It's like that phrase that's written in the rear view mirror of our car. You know, objects appear closer than they may actually in reality. So this Venus square Neptune can have that idealism, that rose-tinted glasses. And there is therefore a need to be more open, again, experimental, flexible is the real key here, as opposed to overly investing or putting all of our eggs in one basket. This is a time period where there can be more questions than answer. But there is this charge. You know, there is a romantic, a creative, a spiritual charge with Venus square Neptune, and we're exploring what is that. With Neptune, we're dealing with themes of longingness. You know, we always experience this spiritual journey for the most part is this, you know, getting deeper and deeper into this mystery of love and mystery of relationships and mystery of God with the capital G, with the capital M, with the capital L, right? So it gets deeper and deeper. And as it gets deeper, the things that we thought that we knew, the principles that we thought we understood becomes loosened. This is a loosening, and it can be a confusing time. This Venus square Neptune can pull at the heartstrings. And we'll be talking about a full moon in Scorpio coming up May 7th that can also be a signal of emotional upheaval. You know, all these deep feelings, frustrations, anger, passion, obsession, these deep, unconscious, oftentimes swept under the rug or buried beneath the surface. There can be this emotional upheaval, this volcanic eruption, and at the same time, there's this uncertainty. We may get a sense at this particular point, very front of May, more what we don't like, who we're not going to be hanging around, more than what we do like and who we're going to be hanging around. This whole year is a global reprioritization. What really matters? Jupiter stations retrograde the day after Venus on May 14th, 27 degrees Capricorn, trine to the sun. This is also bringing up this inquisitiveness. What is the truth? What do we really believe in? What is the purpose of life? Are these religious perspectives and spiritual orientations, are they realistic? Are they working for us? Is there something more? And again, there's this loosening, there's this experimental tension, not to discover, but to test, to explore. This Venus square Neptune can be dizzying. There's also a Dionysian enchantment, charged with curiosity and innocence. So the excitement is there, the energy is there, the desire is there. But the follow through, the commitment, the realistic step by step, that's something that we want to be a little bit more discerning with. And again, maybe not the perfect time to put all of our eggs in one basket, but a great time to be open, flexible, and also not taking the responses of other people or the petty social media debating too seriously. Venus stationing retrograde in Gemini can be a bit of this theme of not everyone who liked what I said or what I did or what I valued in the past will like what I'm interested in, what I value, what I'll be saying and sharing in the future. And that's okay. As our interests and our value systems change, which often coincides with the Venus retrograde period, it's not just who, but how we're approaching and sharing with others can be changing. And this is because we're learning, we're growing, we're evolving. We certainly shouldn't be expecting ourselves or others to stay exactly the same or to stay exactly how we would like them to be for us. This is an experiment to discover how can we come together. We may not know exactly right now, but we can open up this can of worms. We can dream, we can imagine, we can go into our hearts, we can begin to have the conversations. And again, this is going to open up this period of discovery. Okay, I would say this is like a taste testing period. Venus station retrograde square to Neptune. And to give yourself the time, the flexibility, and the permission to go to the all-you-can-eat buffet, fill up your tray with a little bit of everything, and then discover your deeper sense of taste, what you're really interested in, what you'd really want to share, what you'd really want to bring into school for show and tell. There's a lot of this Venus in Gemini retrograde period. And so we can meet the different interests, different facets of ourselves with different people, different groups, and we can explore. We can, keyword, diversify. And we'll be speaking to the moon's north node, transiting into Gemini as well these days. And this isn't going to be just now, but the next 18 and a half months is this Gemini-Sagittarius polarity theme, which has so much to do with learning, exploration, understanding, as well as diversification. Not everybody in the world's on the same page, on the same dimension, and that is okay. This isn't a life of trying to continue the age of religious crusades. We do not need everybody to understand us and our opinion, and that's part of what we will be learning through this coming year and a half. Now, Venus will station direct again at the end of June, square to Mars, and that's when there's going to be a little bit more creative tension and creative push to get things going. At this time, there's this dissolving, opening up, and what can also be a real structural uncertainty and tension. Because it's not just Venus, it's not just Jupiter, it's also Saturn stationing retrograde, right? Coming up these days, coming up this next week. And when we see, so many planets stationing retrograde at the same time, there is this experimental, revolutionary, testing and uncertain nature. Especially Saturn stationing at 1 degree Aquarius in a 3rd quarter square to Uranus. This is a very powerful astrological signature that reflects back our world going through this rebellious, reinventive, and extremely tense period of reinventing the basic structures of reality, of our society, of what the very ground and the foundation we're standing on is all about. That's Saturn. So this is a total structural upheaval, societal rebellion, and incredibly tense, revolutionary, as well as reactive time. There is a electrical charge at this time. This is a Uranian nature. A retrograde is a Uranian signature. Electrical charge, rule breaking, testing the structures to see what's missing. It's like kicking the fundamental columns of the structure, and some of these columns are weak, are rusting, and are therefore going to fall apart. And that's to expose that fundamental column is weak and needs to be rebuilt. There's this fundamental restructuring from the ground up. And again, this plays out so much to do with our orientation to society, job, physical, financial structure. As we've been saying, this whole year of 2020 is a period of global reprioritization. And at the root of this reprioritization, as we've been saying since the start of this year, we're recognizing this societal oppression. So many of the astrologers have not talked about the fact that this Saturn-Pluto conjunction at the beginning of this year were on their own south nodes. That brings up mass time and evolution as it takes place through thousands of years, as it affects our entire human species. And what this means is that these past dynamics to do with societal oppression, patriarchy, war, standards that are unnatural but have been forced upon us because in the olden days we were fighting to survive. And we created these societal structures to hold down this societal way of living and behaving, and created, in many respects, a very restrictive, imprisoning structure that is not necessarily about justice and equality for all, right? We're dealing with people with less advantage, poverty versus people who have all of the wealth, all of the power. And that's the society, not just now. We've been in this society for thousands of years. It's nothing new or different, and that's the theme that's coming up at this time. So there is this opportunity to see, to expose that kind of old face of patriarchy. We're looking at the old emperors. We're looking at the old power and control dynamics, and these are infrastructures, Capricorn. These aren't necessarily even people. We love to blame invisible bad guys, right? That's such a pervasive theme in this end of the age of Pisces, and it largely results from our own escaping the fact that we have power too. We can change this. We can transform this reality, but we tend to blame invisible bad guys. This is not even necessarily people. This is a system. This is a structure. This is our traditions and our hierarchies. That's what needs to change. And that's what this Saturn square to Uranus is really creating this tension. I mean, it's not easy. We're talking about like French Revolution type of energy here, right? That societal oppression is like loading a spring. And that's what we're feeling these weeks. Like, whoa, there's so much tension in this spring. And that spring inevitably lifts off. And that's the rebellion, the breakthrough, the innovation, the groundbreaking discovery, the inventions that are going to take our whole society and species into the future. And guess what? The future is unknown. We don't know what the future looks like, right? It's probably not us all being ascended and riding the UFOs into a heaven dimension. We don't know what this new paradigm is, quite frankly, at all. And there is this necessary experimentation to discover what reality is. But this is not an easy, comfortable situation. This is where we are witnessing so many people very much struggling, even going off the deep end, as I've been saying in these videos for weeks. And you can really see who's going off the deep end at this time, because they start to get wrapped up in nonsense that's not necessarily connected to reality. And that's because Saturn is structure. Not only physical three-dimensional structure, but the structures of consciousness itself. The structures of consciousness itself are dissolving, are opening, being exposed to an unknown future. And this unknown future is coming into our very understanding and experience of life itself. What it means to be a human being, what it means to be born on the earth. The nodal shift into Gemini Sagittarius for the next year and a half. At this time, we're just beginning this exploration. What is life? This has to do with learning and understanding the principles of our human interaction. And that's just kicking off at this time. But absolutely, when we see that Saturnarian structure being broken down, which is what happens when Saturn stations retrograde, that old Roman holiday Saturnalia, I think, reflects Saturn retrograde. During Saturnalia, the whole society broke its rules, and they flipped all the roles around. Men dressed like women, women dressed like men, slaves were fed by their masters. That was Saturnalia, and huge crazy orgies and all this, of course, because it was Rome. But that's Saturn retrograde, breaking the rules, rebellious, anti-authority. That is Saturn retrograde. And square Uranus, the future, the unknown. So we are in the midst of this collective psychosis. Again, Saturnalia. Everyone went insane when these societal structures broke down. Because we don't know what the future is, because we don't know all of the missing information, people can't handle the discomfort of the unknown and then fill in the blanks. Oh, well, this is why we're going through this, or this is what's responsible. And don't you know, it's all some kind of crazy spiritual conspiracy, and we're being punished by God for this or that. I mean, this is not something new. This is what humanity has done for thousands of years when we face the unknown, the mysterious. So we're going through a phase of our collective evolution that is entirely about deconditioning, breaking the rules. Okay, Saturn is conditioned experience. The scientist Pavlov rang a bell, fed a dog, rang a bell, fed a dog, rang a bell, fed a dog, and after so many redundant, reinforcing experiences, the scientist rings a bell and the dog salivates. The dog knows that it's food time. That is called conditioning. You're in a period of deconditioning. Oh, the bell's ringing and there's no food showing up. What does that mean? I guess bell doesn't equal food. We all necessarily go through these phases of conditioning and deconditioning, conditioning, deconditioning, to form structures that honor our evolution and changing understanding of reality, rather than overly assuming this is what reality is, building limiting structures that therefore imprisons us. This is very, very common in our own spiritual evolution. We may join some cult and gain some tremendous spiritual insight, really develop a deeper understanding, get in touch with some higher reality, and then have to realize, oh, but the cult isn't all perfect, and they don't have everything figured out. And I used to think that a guru was an old man who wore a turban. And now I'm starting to realize that an old man who wears a turban is not necessarily an elder. And maybe if they're trying to look so much like an elder and dress up in the fashion trend of a guru, maybe that's even more of an indication that they're actually kind of not solid themselves, or maybe more of a child themselves. So this is a process that we all go through, and that's just an example, probably a common example that many people experience when they go through a spiritual or religious cult. But we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We challenge the reality. Is this all 100% true? Is it just simply what we get on a face level basis? And what we're discovering right now is that there's way more to this reality and these infrastructures and these conditioned experiences and expectations and programs and hierarchies of how we do our job, how we do our relationship, how we share and connect ourselves with others. And it is our species, Aquarius, that's going through this entire restructuring period to really necessarily discover the solutions that we need to make it into this next world where there's going to be way more perspectives, technological breakthroughs, scientific discoveries. This stuff is going to continue to flip everything we thought we knew and understood about life on its head. And that can be a little scary. That can be a little disconcerting and bumpy, but you know what? It is the best thing for us. This is where we really get to take a profound step forward in our evolution evolution. If we are willing and courageous enough to let go of what we are not certain is helpful and beneficial at this particular time. Now, this next week, Monday, May 11th, Mercury and Mars are moving out of the fixed signs of Taurus and Aquarius and coming into a square, May 11th, and then they release that fixed square while they enter mutable signs the 11th to the 12th. Mercury enters his own sign of Gemini. Mercury is also coming into his Promethean face, pioneering, inquisitive, faster thinking, wing-footed god of communication. So we've got that fast, pioneering, inquisitive mind is really going to be speeding up these coming weeks, while Mars enters into Pisces May 13th through June 27th, which is really more about exploring how do we make our desires our reality. Now, when these two planets square and then enter into mutable signs, the 11th to 12th, there's kind of this build-up and then releasing. There's this mental charge, mental anxiety, attention, an experimental breakthrough, kind of this testy mental stress. And then there's this excitement, this fast-paced pinch that then opens up into a more scattered, more aimless, but also more creatively inspired meandering. So again, there's these themes this week in the astrology of this tension, but then creative opening. This tension is because the old is dissolving, and then a creative opening into the future unknown, which requires that flexibility, that creative openness, and that willingness to experiment. We all want to be mad scientists at this time, mixing and matching chemicals, what's going to blow up, what's going to change colors, and then taking down the results. It's all trial and error. So this can be also very inspiring through that exploration. Mars in Pisces is looking for how can we bridge our goals, our dreams. How can we make these ideals real, practical? What are we going to do? How are we going to act? And it is an exploration, and Mars in Pisces is more sensitive. We are more daydreaming. We are more open and receptive to how to act, to how to behave in order to reformulate these fundamental structures of consciousness. It also should be mentioned that Mars in Pisces is more physically sensitive. Okay, and this is going on again, start of... this is going to be taking us through the start of July, which is then followed by a very testy Mars retrograde in Aries, his own sign, squaring Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Capricorn. So, we're talking about some, intensity going on, summertime here. And I think we're probably not likely finished with coronavirus. There could be more waves. There can be a little bit more physical, societal, challenging tests. How are we going to, act and behave? And, what can we stand up for when we're dealing with this type of crisis? And of course, there will be people who will be upset with me for saying that because they believe that coronavirus is a conspiracy theory and will say that I am working for the government or for, the popular news stations. And so wouldn't you know, again, Gemini, diversity, many ideas, many perspectives, and we see the transiting moon's north node, which always reflects our present evolutionary direction. Shifting out of Cancer, everything to do with emotional security, emotional processing. Have we seen that theme at the forefront? While the moon's north node has culminated Cancer, we even got a new Facebook emoji, Care. I think that's a wonderful reflection that our species is embracing our collective evolutionary journey. North node was in Cancer, now it's moving into Gemini. The evolutionary intention is coming into new forms of understanding life. Understanding life, the principles of life, the very basis, the very ontology philosophy, how we approach, how we orient ourselves to life. These themes will especially come in during our summertime eclipses. How to effectively communicate and connect with others. How to connect with like minds, so we can function together as a group and a species. The goal of Gemini is learning through research. There's a diversity of different people with different ideas, different beliefs. How can we relate to such a schizophrenic humanity? Well, something that I'm learning in my own Gemini experimentation is that to a certain degree you can't. Gemini is the understanding that everybody has had their own past experiences, has had their own interpretation of life, and therefore somewhat speaks their own language. This is like the Tower of Babel when that polarity enters Gemini Sagittarius, because we're just starting this. It's just like, what the heck is going on? It's as if we all tune to different channels or different radio frequencies. And this is what I recommend, is that we are discovering at this time, tuning inside. We've even got this full moon, May 7th in Scorpio, this tremendous emotional upheaval. What's really going on beneath the surface? How do we feel deeply in our unconscious? So we're taking this month of May to really more inwardly explore Venus retrograde. What do I like? What do I want to bring into school for show and tell? And that's to create this meeting point, this channel, this vibration that is us, what we like, what we love. Our heart chakra, Venus, sends out this electromagnetic field that tends to attract people of a similar wavelength who value similar things as ourselves. As our own value system changes, so does that magnetic dynamic, and how we relate to others also changes. So we are like playing with the radio dial. Hey, what frequency am I on? And that's going to bring us and to form a meeting point where we can meet others of a similar mind, interested in similar things. I don't encourage us to stay on social media and just endlessly debate. I know it's incredibly easy to do. I struggle with it myself all the time. But as you're probably witnessing, it doesn't result in anyone actually learning anything. As I've mentioned in prior videos, the long-lost art of debate is forgotten. We don't know how to have a constructive argument unless we meet someone on a similar wavelength as ourselves who says, I value the platform of debating, so that way I can share my opinion and you can share yours, and we can actually hear one another and then reformulate our approach. So that's what we're really learning to do with Gemini. How to share our opinion so that way it is received and reflected back from others in a constructive, beneficial type of way. And Gemini is the eternal student, researching, learning, exploring, and learning through diversity. There is a level of objectivity that we can hold in high regard. This experiment of living a human incarnation does not mean that we have to be everyone's best friend, does not mean that we have to be understood by everybody. We couldn't be that if we tried. That's one of the most surefire ways to end up self-sacrificing. So no, it's an experiment. We're just looking, wow, look at that group and look at what they're saying and look at the kind of chemical reaction, how that meets others, what ends up being exchanged, what kind of energy and what kind of dynamic that has. And similarly, when we're speaking or we're teaching or we're sharing, what kind of chemical reaction does that have? Gemini is like a formula, A plus B equals C. So we're looking at these if-then statements. If I say it this way, I get this reaction. If I say it that way, I get this reaction. Everyone sort of does speak their own language. It's very, very tricky, therefore, for me to shoot these videos, or certainly if you saw the video I did on conspiracy theories, it really drove home this whole reality, because people hear different things. People even interpret different meanings to what I'm saying. And the goal of Gemini is to therefore articulate, to use language for what language is meant to be, to use words for what they're defined as, so that way we can communicate in a way that's hopefully different than the Tower of Babel. Hopefully we can share our ideas and be understood by others. And if you find that you're not being understood by others, that's okay, because you've just happened to find yourself in the most appropriately suited time period to make changes and revisions to how you're sharing, how you're communicating, and how you're showing up in relationship. What I was interested in and what I valued in the past may not be what I'm interested in and value in the future. Because we are all learning, growing, and evolving souls, and that's okay that we change. We don't have to be limited to a particular group, or a particular teaching, or a particular belief, or a particular relationship, and that's how we honor our truly authentic nature. We are all shapeshifters. We all get to be chameleons. We all get to satiate the different parts of ourselves with different people in different places and share the diversity of our own interests. And that's what allows us to really blossom as beautiful and educated souls. The mind is a beautiful thing. The logical left brain discerning if-then statements is a beautiful thing. This is how we can really form new relationships to our world that are productive, that are beneficial, and not only that, exciting. Introducing the new. The new is going to start coming in, particularly when we pull ourselves out of the trenches of 2020. And the new is fresh. It is exciting. It is like being born into a new dimension where there are new possibilities, what it means to be alive, what it means to be human beings. And so I'm wishing you all the best, and may we harness that excitement and use that tension, even though this is a bumpy time, and this full moon in Scorpio tends to be, again, an emotional full moon, to be very gracious, very slow and gentle on ourselves, to allow for this breaking down to happen naturally, without punishing ourselves or feeling bad about it or blaming others. That way, this reformulation can weave and stitch us back together in such brilliantly improved, exciting, and fresh ways. So again, wishing you the best through this amazing collective process of dying and rebirthing. Take care.